welcome to another live build. In today's request, we have a client coming in from Upwork and they want to build something. So let's go through the request. Hello, I'm looking for someone who can create the registration form for one-day workshops. Each workshop has a limited number of spots, so once it's fully booked, registration for that workshop should automatically close. The form should also collect participants' information, example, name, contact details, etc. It can be built using a tool like Airtable, but I'm open to other solutions if you have better suggestions. Now that's quite interesting and I think very straightforward. In this case, I think Airtable can deliver this result without us having to go and look for additional tools. So let's go to Airtable and try to build something for this client. All right, let's open Airtable and here we are. So if you look closely here, I already started building the items because I wanted to save some time. And as you can see, we have just some very basic Airtable fields. I would go through each of them. So the first is the name of the workshop, the date of the workshop. We have a start time, end time, and we have maximum seats. This is very important because the client has straightforward asked that we should restrict these registrations based on capacity. So we need to define the number of seats that are available for each workshop. And also we need to count the number of registrations that are done. So let's go through it quickly again. I need to kind of walk through each of the field type. So the first we have here would be standard text field. We have a date field type here. Also we have a start time. This could be just a basic text, or we can also use the date, but in this case I just used standard text. End time as well, can be any of these, but again, if these are mostly kind of predetermined, you could use a select field as you see here. The reason why I'm using different fields is just to show you that this can be achieved in different ways. For the maximum seats, we have just a numbers field. So here we just use the standard numbers field, so we can just type in how many people we want for that particular workshop. And then the rest of the fields are where we get a bit creative. So let me bring this one a bit forward so that it kind of makes sense. So first, you can see that this field looks a bit different, and it's because it's a lookup field. This field is looking up the content in the participants table. I will show you that a bit later. And one thing that's also very important is we are allowing linking of multiple records, because there could be multiple people applying for this workshop. So it's very important that we allow multiple records to be linked there. The next field is a count field, as you can see. So we are using count, and we are counting the number of registrations that have been done. So here we are just kind of counting the number of items that are present in this participants column. So here you can see we have 2 items and here we have 1. So we're just basically counting it. And that's why we have 2, 1, and 0. So just counting. And the next field is quite interesting as well, because this is where we introduce our first formula field. And as you can see, it already shows F to show that it's a formula. But when I open this formula, it's really quite straightforward. So I'm using an if function here. I'm saying if the seats booked, which is this count, is greater than or equal to the maximum seats, which is the maximum seats that are available for that particular workshop, we want to return closed, which means no more registration. We don't want to show this form anymore. And if it is not matching this condition, we want to keep it open so people can still register. This is a very simple formula. If you don't know how to write it, I think you can use the create formula with AI and just describe the scenario or the conditions you want. So that's that. And straight away, you can already see that in this case, we are expecting a maximum of 2%, and in this case, we have 2. So that formula is returning closed. So if I increase this number to 5, for instance, you can see now that that workshop becomes open because we haven't reached the 5% maximum seats. So let's return this to 2 because it's just going to help us with our example. And then as a rule of thumb, I like to always make the record ID visible. This is just in case I choose to add it later somewhere, or if I'm going to use an external automation, I need to always have a way to reference that record. And then lastly, I have a form field. This is really not configured with any additional stuff, but it's just a hard-coded URL of the form just to make it easier and accessible directly from the workshop page. So for this table, those are the basic items that we need. And then let's go to the second table, which is the participants themselves. So in this table, we have the participant ID, there's just numbers field again. We have the name, it's a text field. We have the email, which is also a text field. This can also be an email field for validation purpose. So let's make that an email field. I hope I won't lose the contents. Let's see. Good. So it's an email field. We have a phone field. In this case, it's also text, but it can also be a phone field. So let's try to do the same thing just to see if it works, and I hope we don't lose that data. So yep, it's there. So we have that font field right there. Next, we have this linked record. Again, it kind of goes back to the workshop. So remember, I talked about the linked record. So this is linking to the workshop, just like I showed you previously. The only thing we need to change here will be this allow, because we want one registration per person for one workshop. So if you we don't need to link multiple records in this case, so just one per registration. I have a workshop roll-up field. Again, this for me is just a best practice, just in case we need to build further automations at the back. I always like to kind of create a reference to the source, and in this case, I'm just using this formula here. I'm rolling up this field and I'm looking for the workshop ID, which is just the record ID I explained earlier. There's one quick thing I also like to do. In this case, by default, it shows array as unique. This means if you're looking at this from an API standpoint or something, maybe if you're building external automation, this could show up as it will show up as an array. It's really not my best preference, and especially in this case where we are limiting the selection of the workshop to individual records. So instead of having an array there, I think it's always best and easier to just have the item directly. So I will use a concatenate field. So it's basically the same thing, but it just shows it as a line item instead of an array. So I'll just save that. Here you wouldn't see any much difference. It will just be the same thing. So that's fine. And lastly, I have a timestamp, which is just basically a date field with time. All right, so now that we have the tables out of the way, let's go and look at the form themselves. So first, let's come back to the workshop field. I'm going to expand this a bit. And the first thing you will also see here is that I have created different views in Airtable. These are called views. By default, I think this just shows defaults, but I renamed it. So I just clicked here and rename view, and you can put whatever you like. And I have a second view as well, but this view I just duplicated the first one. So I click here, I duplicate, and then I just rename it. So that's how to duplicate the view. So we don't need that one. But what I've done here is that I've created those, I've renamed them to open and filled. And what I'm also doing is that I'm filtering these views. So for this open, I want only workshops where the status is open. And remember, we are using this formula field as the status. We already talked about it. So it's open when the seat booked is not equal to or more than the maximum seats available. So that's the only thing we are doing here. We're just saying show us only workshops where the status is open. And it's exactly the same thing with the field. Here we're just doing the opposites, and we're saying show us workshops where the status is closed. And you will see why these views are important. All right, and that's it for the views. I can close that. I can come to the participant again, and here we didn't create views, but yeah, I think I made a mistake with the comment earlier. It's not default views, grid view. This shows up every time you create a new item. So you can rename it if you want. So I could just rename it and say all workshops, all registrations or wherever. I'll just leave it as all. Doesn't change anything. But what's very important here now is that we have created a registration form where participants can register. So let's go in there and take a look. So once I click it, it shows this Airtable form. This is kind of the older version of the form. There is a newer version of the Airtable form, but this one does the job very well. And the first thing you will notice here is that I didn't use two fields. So the participant's ID, it's not needed in the registration itself, and the timestamp, it's really not needed here. But the main thing we need is what we need are the rest of the fields rather. So here, just basic description of the form. You can put whatever you want. And then we are collecting the workshop that the participant is registering for, their name, their email, and phone number. So these are just fields that we have in the participant table. And how do you do this? If you want to add a new field, you just drag it from here into here, and you can see we've added that field. And if you don't want it, you just take it back and it's there. And this is where our first logic comes in. If we go back to the condition, the requester has says each workshop has a limited number of seats, and once it's booked, registration automatically closes. So what we've done now is to call that condition that we created using the formula in the workshop sheet. So we are saying we just dragged in the selected workshop from the table there, and we are saying limit record selection to a view, and now we are selecting the open. So again, you can see all the three views we had earlier in the workshops. They are really up here. So we don't want to use the all because it's just going to show everything. We are more concerned on the ones where the condition is open. So that's why we have that here. The rest of the fields are just the standard basic fields. So the name, you can add some description here if you want. The email, the phone number, and the submit button. These are just additional basic conditions. So if you want the user to submit multiple items, you can just Click, I think, this one, but the first one here, see will submitted. This is more like when you're using Airtable internally. Members will have to be already assigned to that table for you to see this information. In this case, we don't need it. So if I try to turn it on, it will say it requires people to sign in to Airtable. We don't need it in this case. Allow people to request a copy of their reference. So again, this is not a function we can use. Airtable branding, I'm using a free Airtable, so these ones are totally off. Share the message. This is what you get after submitting the form. So you can say thank you for registering for this workshop, for instance, or whatever is due that you want. And then there are some additional actions here. So show a submit another response button. That's if you want multiple stuff. Show a new blank form after 5 seconds. It's just straight what it means. And email me at this is the email address that I'm using for this Airtable. So it's just directly saying that if someone submits, send me a copy. And I think that's it for the form. If you click on open form, it just kind of opens a copy or opens the form URL. And as you can see, we are straight up in the registration page. So same thing as I discussed and explained earlier, but the only thing you will notice now is that when I decide to choose a workshop, it's now going to show me only 2 workshops that are still open for registration. And it has filtered out that intro workshop, which is this one. So let's go back to the workshop table and let's go back to all so that we can see everything. So you can see that this intro to design is not in the drop down because the status is closed. And this one we have 3 and this one we have 2. So that's why that condition is not showing up here. So let's say I want to register for the project management workshop. I choose that. I put in my name. So I'll call this registrar 1 and I put in some test email and I put in some phone number and I submit. So you see, this is that message that we customized earlier. And what will have happened in the back end of the Airtable, as you can see, is that we now have a new registration and it has now counted the seat booked as 1, but it's still open. If we come back to the registration, I go back to the views, you can see that we have a new registration for that particular course, which is the project management. And if we come to the counts, I think we have 1 of 2. So let's go back again to the form. I think I can just refresh this and it will reload the form. And in this case, we should still be able to see these 2 courses because we haven't met the condition of filtering. So let's register for the same course again. So I'll call this participant 2 and I'll say this. It's my email. Sorry, it should be an @ sign, else it will error out. And that's .com and just put in some phone number again and we submit that form. I'm just going to refresh it because we'll come back to the form. And once we come back to the workshop again, so we go to participants, you can see we have participant 2 who has now registered, and once again they registered for the same course. But what you will now notice is that we have reached the maximum capacity of the seats, which is 2, and it matches here. So the status is now closed, which means when we come back to this form to register, we would no longer be able to register for that course or workshop. We now have only the advanced coding option which we can register for. So I think that's it. So you can see from this example that the form is already working well. Participants are only allowed to register the workshops that they want, and the ones that are available and not closed. One thing I noticed is that I am using kind of hard-coded participant ID. We can also simply change this to, we can use an Airtable formula just to make sure that that field is always filled. So we just come in here and bring back the record ID so that we don't have to always manually. This is a good step. You can pause this alert. Sometimes it gets really annoying. And as you can see now, that participant ID gets populated by itself. Another item we can populate automatically will be the timestamp for when the registration was done. So we can also change this from time or date to created time. As you can see, once I click on that, it populates the rest of the fields, and that's it. Quite easy, straightforward. You can build as many workshops as you need. If you want to add additional fields information, you can go as wild as you want. For the participants field as well, you can collect more items, name, location, city. You just need to add more items in the columns and come back to the form itself and drag them in as needed. And with that, I think we got everything we wanted. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope I get to see you watching the next video. And if you have any question or any idea or some basic challenges you're trying to achieve with Airtable, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I will go through them, and hopefully we will get to build something that solves your problem. With that, thank you once again, and it's a goodbye. Bye bye.